Welcome back to Dialogue 340. This is Richard Dorsey here. I'm joined by my wonderful co-host to my left and my right. Ladies first, Daren, the illustrious Chalana Brown.
Hey.
I got Fight him in the comments, the Bear Georges.
Mm-hmm.
And we have Positive T. Nelson with us, one of our gubernatorial candidates for the 2026 election cycle. And we're here. We want to be fair. We want to be tough. We want to give everybody the ability to speak openly about their candidacy and what they want to do for the Virgin Islands. So I'll start off positive. Everybody was, everybody has a hero. Could you tell me who your hero was growing up and how they helped to mold you into the person that you are? We want to start with a background of Positive Nelson.
My hero was my parents. They're just hardworking people, making it happen, not high education. Publicly, I have an uncle, Kennedy Simmons. He's actually former Prime Minister of St. Kitts Nevis. When we went there to visit, I'd stay there because that's where the boy cousins were. And just see him handle himself and hearing certain situations as a young man. And here on island, I didn't know him because I was a boy, but just what he gave off was Governor Cyril King. Just watching him, just him stopping and questioning us about how we doing in school, what's not. So that would be some of my heroes. Gave me like something I wanted to follow. Yeah.
Mm.
So let me ask this question. What drove like educational experiences? Like what brought you to what did you study? And then how did that lead you to the path to the Senate? Because you were a senator for a number of years.
Yes, 7 terms.
What guided you into that direction?
Okay, so it wasn't no real ambition. I graduated out of high school. Everybody was going someplace, so I had to go someplace. Your parents, I'm going to be honest, it wasn't no, I had to go someplace. My parents were, you have to do something. And I actually went to St. Augustine's College where I studied accounting, and I chose accounting because my eldest sister was studying accounting. And St. Augustine had the shortest application at the time. No highly. I'm the frankly honest. And, of course, going to college, I joined Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. And that got me engaged with the community, doing community events. And that got me into public speaking. Most people wouldn't believe it, but I was shy about speaking in front of audiences. But when you have to step and stand up there and say your name as a fraternity member, that helped a lot. And of course, I studied martial arts. I began studying martial arts in 1990, and I still currently do it. So for me, I just needed to be somebody. I'm going to tell you this. Early up, I saw roots. We were living with a young man. I was in elementary school, and when you see something like Roots, and back then they used to show it for like a week, a series, and you watch it day after day, and it was messing with my mind, but it made me to understand that people sacrifice for us, so I have to do something with my life as a black man. For me, I'm going to be a black man that's going to be about something. I did it. I had no political ambition. It was, my friends still laugh. I still laugh at myself having been involved in politics and now in pursuit again. Not a political ambition, but just loving people. So it was just making something of myself. The degree, getting involved in the organizations, got me involved in community. And when I decided to come back home, it was exactly for that purpose. I had started getting involved in the community of Raleigh, North Carolina. And I'm like, I need to be doing this at home. Again, no political ambition. That just happened because I took a teaching job and I was fighting for my own rights.
I was just going to say, I remember when you were an educator and I was in school at the time, and I found that there were people who were educators and they were doing what they were supposed to do, right? But there was also people who were always engaging us outside of the standard classroom talk. And so in saying that, those are the first times I heard about like the terminology liberation, decolonization. He was part of this group of teachers, right? And I wanted to know what was your epiphany? You said roots a little bit, but what was also your epiphany at that time in wanting to engage younger persons in those sort of
Okay,
ideologies?
So I'm glad you asked that question. So I was living in North Carolina, and my first son was coming, and I was a college graduate, and I'll be frankly honest, everything wasn't on the up and up with me. I was doing some things that probably should not have, I got away. But as my son was coming, I wanted if something happened to me, I wanted my son to have a good story, I don't want to say your father was a piece of crap, so I wanted to make something and do something, and I sort of went to the church. I grew up going to the church. I went back to the church. I used to go with my martial arts instructor and sort of made a deal with God. God helped me to walk away from this and live a life to serve you. And what I wanted to do then is help young people, because I realized that when we're young, we don't make the best decisions. And so I wanted to be there as a guide because I realized I had a knack for talking to people. We used to do speeches in schools for self-defense because you couldn't do any demonstration. And the principals of those schools up there, middle school, was always amazed. I didn't know they were sending me the worst students, but they were always amazed that this one person in the room had control over these students. And so my deal with God was help me to help young people to make something of themselves, get to those turbid years of make decision making. And that's why I took the teaching job actually at Complex when they were hiring teachers. They were going up and down the East Coast looking for teachers for the new school. And I went and I applied because I realized that I have something to contribute to young people. And that's why I realized that young people have a problem because they go home, they go to messed up homes. So it all comes together.
So, what other civic organizations or social issues did you champion before you got into the Senate? Because we're going to touch on your Senate career before. So, you were a teacher, you're a martial arts instructor. Any other community organizations or engagements you were involved in?
So what I did when I started teaching, right away I started an after-school program, tutorial and martial arts, because if they're not disciplined, that's an issue. I became the AFT shop steward, the American Federation of Teachers. So I was the person who had to go down to the union office, asking questions on my colleagues' behalf. And luckily for me, it was a whole bunch of young teachers. I was 27 when I started teaching, and most of us were in our 20s. We had just came back from the States, and I was going to the union office, asking about our issues, not getting paid, don't have supplies, just the same old we keep hearing. And amazing is that older teachers at the union office were complaining about us young people being impatient. Like, what's wrong with you? It's only 12 weeks. We waited 18 weeks. We waited 21 weeks. And I'm like, what? Who does that? So that and just, summer camps. I started Positive Works, Inc. I started an independent union, our Virgin Islands Labor Union. Just engaged. I was just doing what I can. I was just busy at work, trying to make up for all the bad I've done. Yeah.
Well, why a labor union? Why specifically a labor union?
Well, remember, I got thrown as the AFT shop steward. And why a labor union? Because working people pass on the challenges to their children. Remember, I was teaching, and every day there were some students that you'd make them all right today, and they'd be all motivated, and then they come back the next day looking like somebody dropped a heavy load on them, and you wonder, like, what's wrong? And you realize that they had challenges at the home, and sometimes the challenges came from frustrated parents. So I was already in a labor union, and people would approach me about certain issues they were having. They saw me as a vocal person, and they came to me with the issue which I had no authority over. And so we started an independent union that could be open for people who don't have access to a union at their jobs, and to try to get people help because their frustration. And I didn't even realize at the time that was the first independent labor union founded in America in over 50 years, until Cornell professors started calling me and trying to find out what was the temperament at the time, that they were surprised that we were able to do this in this modern time, because unions, as you know, are not so popular anymore.
Well, speaking of unions, we know in history that we were the architect for the modern labor unions, right?
Yes, the Sacred Labor Union, yeah.
Exactly, right. So that was spearheaded by D. Hamilton Jackson, and it had this influence in the United States, right? So for me, you just mentioned the socioeconomic issues, and you help these students, and then they revert back to their environment, and they kind of shift this. Whatever impact you had was limited, right? How did you take that and take it further as you went from an educator, and I assume you went straight over to the Senate? What was your motivation to become a senator? Because I think I have to believe those things really impacted you.
Well, that was exactly it, that I needed to be somewhere where I can have actually, being in a labor union that I really did not officially represent these people. I was limited in how far I could go in even trying to check out things on their behalf. So the Senate, I ran for the Senate because I felt like the Senate would give me leverage to knock on doors. And even while being a senator, some of the best things I did wasn't the passing of bills, were just picking up the phone and making a phone call and getting a bottleneck cleared. And it's going to lead me to why I see government being more efficient is the answer, because somebody shouldn't have to have a special godmother or godfather in a high government office to call somebody to get a piece of paper that's sitting on a desk signed. And so
I would like to engage with that. Like, what do you see through working in our infrastructures and framework? What do you see is the thing that we're lagging most, that you think if you were to be able to be governor, of course you will be inheriting things and we don't expect a fast turnover. But what are the specifics that you could tell us that you see are holding us back and not progressing us forward?
our attitude towards service. The idea is we have to think government being more efficient. We have to, and Governor King was on this page where give us your best effort. You know, I feel a lot of people sort of don't do their best effort, and that's their get back for the underpaid, or that's their get back for being in the working conditions. And we need to shift that attitude. We need to build back morale. We need to get employees to realize that it's on you. You know, do a job. The Virgin Islands seal say what? Pride in service, pride in work. We don't do a job that we're proud of. When a manager comes and says, "Who did this?" and you're not the one saying it was me, that's because you know you did not give your best effort. When you do your best effort, you're quick to jump up and say, "I did it, I did it." So I feel getting government to be more efficient by optimizing our work hours.
So accountability, like with
Accountability, pretty
workers
much.
themselves.
With workers, with an inventory, you name it.
Do you think there's a need for more investment in bringing up that workforce, and not just morality, but in the same thing you said, there's needs that people have outside of the work in order for them to be efficient at work? Do you think that's something that we also as a government need to do so we can make sure that people come to work efficient?
Well, I do believe professional development is necessary because it's going to enhance the worker. Right now, I believe it's just the attitude that employees have. They're not getting their best. You know, it's called emotional intelligence in the job these days, where if employees feel that the employer cares,
Yeah.
then they'll give a better effort. If they feel the employer doesn't care, then it's like, I remember when teaching started, when I started to walk in the parking lot going to work and my steps were echoing in my ear, I knew it was time to leave the job because it was becoming a burden. And I was a highly motivated teacher, but I had gotten whooped to the point that I can't do this. I didn't want to go there and not give my best.
Right.
And I think some people just hold on to get the retirement and they're no longer giving their best. They just slide into. So I believe with management, and management makes a difference. Management makes a big difference. Frontline manager is not just the top official, but the frontline, those who engage the employees. I think it's very important who you have there and what they do there.
So I want to circle back to your time in the Senate because we're in the second half of our first half hour. Do you feel like you gave your best during your senatorial career? Was there anything that you felt was unresolved or you left it on the table?
I believe I did give my best. Part of me wanting to get out of there is you have a lot of egos and we're not really dealing with the day-to-day operation of government. The Senate is not in charge of the day-to-day operation of government. And believe it or not, if I can tell anybody anything outside there is that what's preventing us from coming up with the best solutions sometimes is not the lack of ideas or the lack of intelligence, but egos where someone is not going to support you because they don't want you to get quote unquote political mileage. And until we get more mature in politics, we're going to continue to, the people are going to be the ones who are going to suffer. When an administration takes over and doesn't want to continue something that began because they don't want the last administration to get props, that's childishness. We need not those individuals running no office because that's exactly where I saw the Senate was coming at a stalemate. We don't need a whole lot of new laws.
Can we dig down a little bit deeper in that one? Where have you seen laws or legislation or even policy changes stymied because of that same ego-driven, it's time to talk about the Senate career and the cost. Where have you seen that actually either been a prevention or an opposition to moving things forward?
You want me to speak about a specific piece of legislation?
Yes, we
That's
want
good.
specifics.
So there was in 2010, and that's what I'm grateful for, that there's public record. My life has been a public record since 1995. In 2010, I introduced something called the Virgin Islands Infrastructure Reconstruction Plan. Now, it was a $3 billion plan. And they did talk about borrowing money, bonds, and paying off the old bonds, get some life extended, get the extra cash to invest in the infrastructure. The same infrastructure that we still have not invested in. And the colleagues, we got Morgan Stanley to catch a red-eye flight from New York, stop in Puerto Rico, pick up some other executive, and come over here for an 8 o'clock meet in the morning. And because of immaturity, the governor at the time, Governor DeYoung, he pulled back the finance commissioner, and then there's people in the Senate who were part of his crew. They didn't attend this meeting, and these people had our entire portfolio, all our bonds ratings, and they were telling us what was possible with our current bond condition and with what we're trying to do here. And when this thing came for voting, they were like, "Oh, well, it's too big of an idea," or, "Well, you should have explained it to us better." And they just did not show up, and they just blocked that whole issue. And that we could have, at the time, that would have taken us leap years ahead. Yeah, so
75 more years until the 22nd century. So can you be more specific? How would have that planned enable us to get prepared for the diversification we're going to need to be able to be part of this global infrastructure?
Okay, good question. What is still our number one problem? WAPA.
Mm.
That plan spoke about, we keep band-aiding WAPA when we need to have a total reconstruction. We need to build a new power plant. The power plant in St. Croix in particular need to move from downtown. It needs to go on the south side. Renaissance property is right there available for us. WAPA already has piece next to it, and put a multi-source plant that is, I didn't come up with this. The energy experts tell us multi-source two-way grids where you having all the availability, whether you want to use renewables, whether you want to use natural gas, whether you want to use propane, whether you want to use the same oil with new machines. If we did a new WAPA running on the same number 6 expensive oil, or number 6, number 2, or whatever number it is, right? With modern equipment, we'll cut the fuel cost in half because it's just more efficient.
that.
Right. And Morgan Stanley told us this. This will be considered a revenue bond. This doesn't even have to be considered in the other bond because this will pay for itself, the savings of fuel. So infrastructure, transportation. Transportation is more than roads. Transportation is ways to get people around, sidewalks, bike paths, pathways, to the beaches, to the parks, we have a beautiful island, and you have to pretty much be a hiker to go to the bush to get to everything. Transportation also includes public transit system, making sure that we have transportation on and off islands, cargo, people. Commerce is about moving goods and people. When we're restricted from leaving the island, when we're restricted from even due to prohibitive costs in going to our neighboring islands, there should be commuter costs for us. That shouldn't be almost $300. And that's where infrastructure comes in. There's highway funds to help us transit because we are a territory separated by water. We can't build bridges, but you can have commuter planes, ferries that can take cars, all of the above. That's available to us.
So I want to touch on your senatorial career a little bit more. Were you able to chair any committees during your 7th term?
Yes. So my first term, I chaired the Agriculture Committee. The second term, I chaired the Finance Committee, and I love that. My background is accounting. I have a degree in accounting. I have a Bachelor of Science in accounting. And I was able to dig down, especially in a public setting at the hearings. I would dig down and get real answers from these commissioners and what's not. And I'm going to tell you what I figured out is the issue. We like playing, what term I want to use? It'd be like writing checks without balancing our checkbook. And people don't realize that there's 2 accounts. One account holds the local funds, one account holds the federal funds. In accounting, there's a bunch of ledgers. Okay, ledgers is your books, your accounting books and the job. It's not really talking about your bank accounts.
Yes.
And when you're writing from these accounts and you have, especially when we bust the budget every year, meaning we pass a balanced budget and immediately after you have senators doing favors, making additional appropriations from an already balanced budget. When you're doing that, then the law allows for the Office of Management and Budget to have discretion over spending. So whatever the law was that passed, the budget is no longer in effect. The executive branch now has control, and when you're playing that favor between certain senators and an administration, then something comes up after the fact, and then they appropriate monies to that, and it gets expediting above or before things that were planned and originally budgeted.
Let's rewind up a little bit then. So you're saying it's not just the executive branch and their allocation and what they deem is necessary. You have actual senators bossing the budget because they're putting after the fact appropriations.
Yeah, well, the law for budgeting is with the Senate. The Senate is who's supposed to pass a balanced budget. But at the same time, it's the Senate who also makes appropriate. Like the governor can't appropriate. The governor has to send a bill to the Senate, and then the Senate has to agree and make that appropriation also. But when the same Senate that passed a balanced budget continue to pass, and people don't realize the game, it's like you heavy on the radio or something, so you come to me about something, and I want the political points, so I go past that issue. But if it's $1 million and it's already spent, and I go say, well, okay, take this 10,000 and pursue that initiative that Mr. Georges came to me with.
But it takes several people in order for that to pass. So what is the
Oh,
parameters that
okay.
allow for that?
So this is where you see party politics.
I wanted
People.
to ask about that. Go ahead.
I'm not trying to pick a fight with them.
Yeah.
But
Right.
when people are just going along, okay, for those two terms that I was had a chairmanship, I was also in the majority. And one big dispute we would have all the time is that, oh, Senator Nelson is not being fair because we're supposed to be a block and I'm supposed to vote on everything the majority says we're going to vote on. Well, we're supposed to have caucus discussions, and at the caucus discussions, I always express whether my displeasure or my disagreement, and the most I would offer is, okay, I won't beat up on it, but I can't vote for it. But they used to be upset and wouldn't support my initiative because they would say, I don't support everything they bring. My philosophy in government is if it's good for the people, I support it. If it's not, I don't. It's that simple.
So I wanted to ask, not trying to throw stones or anything like that. I know that in your time in the Senate, you were independent, right? So you kind of
I was
touched onto that.
I was an ICM.
ICM.
ICM, sorry. I apologize.
ICM.
I apologize, ICM.
No, no.
Citizen.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you are not part of the Democratic Party. Did you have friction? I know you kind of alluded to it, but was there friction because you are ICM and not part of the Democratic Party, which is the
the strong party.
Yeah.
Okay, so I personally didn't have friction because I can work with anybody.
Yeah.
But they have a habit of if you're not part of their team, then they want to suppress initiatives you bring because again, they want to have the upmanship. They want to show that well, the party did this, and I'll say this: whether it's national or local, party politics doesn't serve the people well. Because if you're just going to hold a position, despite how good it is for the people, despite how much help it can bring, and you're just going to hold back because it's your party's position, and you don't want the other party to get points, that's nonsense. And I'm hoping I think not just the Virgin Islands public, but the American public is starting to get displeasure with all of that.
And I want to ask because we remiss not to ask, what's going on with the ICM party? Because we haven't heard from them. I just wanted to know, like, I know
Okay.
somebody's wondering out there.
Okay, big question. So it still exists. I'm no longer an ICM man. I'm an independent now. I believe sometimes, and I think this happening with all the parties, when you have old guards refusing to let go, sometimes it's hard to grow something. I think the ICM party platform makes a world of sense for us. We are the Virgin Islands, we're part of America, but American politics don't benefit us necessarily. And we got to be careful when we side with who's in power up there, because if we're not aligned with the power broker at the time, it works against us. Our issue is the Virgin Islands, and that's where our focus should be. So there is a place for it. And the ICM party platform makes sense. The issue is growing the party. There's some characters inside there who sometimes turn people off, and we just haven't been able to get people to gravitate to it. I think with the lack of young people participating in the political process, I think that's also what's working against us, even for the other party.
So we are about 5 more minutes. I want to touch on the relationship between the executive and the legislature. You've been a senator under how many governors now? DeYoung, you did
It's our Turnbull.
Howard Turnbull, you did the map as well before you.
Yeah, they'll put that on the map.
What do you have as a takeaway from your time in the legislature, now looking at the gubernatorial office, to say this is a way I can relate to the legislature, or I have now more nuance in relating to the legislature? Because the last two terms for Albert Bryan, at times has been very combative with the legislature. Do you think you'd be a combative governor? Would you work with the legislature? How would that?
Well, you have to work with the legislature. It makes no sense, and I did offer this advice during this term. It doesn't make any sense to fight with the legislature because they're just going to hold their ground and you're just going to make everything for you more complicated. Do you have to accept everything that they send forward? No. but diplomacy, stoicism. So over the past maybe 3 years, I'm getting into this stoic philosophy, Marcus Aurelius and these guys, and it's helped me to just be better in control of myself, my language, and focusing on the objective. Governors, people who sit at the head of the executive branch need to keep that in mind, that it doesn't make any sense to pick a fight with a group that you're going to need to pass your initiative. Remember, I told you the governor can't change the laws or appropriate monies on his own. He needs friends in the legislature, or at least a supportive legislature, in order to pass the initiatives. How I was successful in the legislature, even though I had people up against me, is I would make my presentation. I would appeal not to the legislature. I would appeal to the public. This is what I'm trying to do, and there are people trying to block me. And that's how I got past them every time, when they were trying to not support initiatives that I was bringing forward because they didn't want me to get political mileage. They appeal to the people. So you make a much better effort appealing to the people than arguing with the same body that you're going to need to pass the initiative you set it down.
Do you believe that the governor should be litigious when dealing with the legislature if he can't get his way? Well, I can't get their way.
I don't see the need to. It's conversations help, diplomacy helps. It's just about opening up the channel and keeping them open, and not ensuring that nobody on your team creates, and I've told more than one governor this, don't let anybody on your team create more waves or mess for you than you. Yeah, so
You're a gubernatorial candidate, but I wanted to lend to your knowledge base for voters. Like, what if you become governor? What kind of person should people be voting for when they're picking senators? What will work best with governors, no matter party politics, and making things at the forefront for Virgin Islanders and not party politics?
very good question. Look for even-keeled people who hasn't, so polarized. Everything you say is not bad because we're not on the same page. Because we're not on the same party doesn't mean everything you say is incorrect or bad. And look for mature people who's been involved. Look for people who's been involved in some kind of way in the community, where you've seen some evidence. You can't know a person's heart. You can only know their
What
heart
it
by the
deeds,
actions.
yeah,
right?
actionable
So
things.
you kind of see who's been involved. Unfortunately, around election time, and this was one disgust I had during campaign season, is, somebody will sit there and say, no, you don't do anything for the children. No. I know what I do every day. I know what I've been doing for since I've been back in 95, what I do weekly, 3 times a week in martial arts, from summer camps. And when people can just broad brush us like that, because the fact is, there are a few up there that who hasn't done
Okay.
anything, just popped up during election season, and now they're saying, I want to save the world, I'm interested for the Virgin Islands. You should have shown and demonstrated some interest prior to. And I think people get lost in election season. They go for the jingles, they go for the shirts, they go for the giveaways, they go for the big jam, and they sometimes forget that these people show no public interest whatsoever at all.
Name 3 things that should be at the forefront when we are looking for senatorial candidates.
Character matters. Okay, character. Person should not be somebody of integrity. Some exhibition of public interest prior to.
Okay.
And I say this with caution, because education is important, but you don't have to be a degreed individual. You follow me? But you should be able to be versed, to be able to understand the language, to be able to read and dissect. Bills, because too many times, and I've seen this, I'm not trying to act smarter than that, but I've seen this where senators are reading a bill and they don't understand, and you perhaps have seen this too, having worked there. They don't understand what they're reading, and then they get different interpretations from people, and then they come on the Senate floor trying to explain something that they don't understand, and you could tell very well that they're not that versed in what they're trying to explain, and it's embarrassing for us.
So thank you so much. We never have enough time, ladies and gentlemen. This is only part 1. Part 2, we're going to get into from the Senate seat to the commissioner seat, and how you managed to go from legislative to executive branch. And then we dive into more of your gubernatorial views and aspirations. Dialogue 340, Senator Nelson, Chalana Brown, Fighting Minute Terrance, Daren, Richard Dorsey. We'll be back.